back to the Washington Outsider Report on the Coalition Radio. For those newly joining the program, my name is Irina Zuckerman, and I'm the editor-in-chief of the Washington Outsider. With us today is a special guest from Ukraine, the member of the Ukrainian Parliament, Oleksiy Goncharenko. He is a member of the Ukrainian delegation to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, Vice President of the PACE Committee on Migration, Refugees, and Internally Displaced Persons, Head of the Caucus for Democratic Belarus for Free Caucasus in the Ukrainian Parliament, and he is also the founder of the biggest network of educational, cultural, and volunteer centers in Ukraine, named eponymously. He is also sanctioned by the Russian Federation, and we'll discuss all of this today. We'll discuss his work as well as the situation in Ukraine beyond what we see in the media, what we're not getting from news coverage and from the political back and forth in the United States. Welcome back, and thank you so much for joining us today. If you could tell us a little bit about your background, how you came to be involved in politics, and how you ended up on the Russian sanctions list as well.
Hello, my name is Oleksiy Goncharenko. Like you told, I have an honor to represent Odessa region in Ukrainian Parliament. I always was interested in politics, starting from my teenager age. So first I tried my luck on the elections to the Odessa City Council when I was 21. At that time it was unsuccessful. The next election cycle, I was elected when I was 25, elected member of Odessa City Council. Then I was in Odessa Regional Council, deputy head, the first deputy, and then the president of Odessa Regional Council. After this, I was elected to the parliament, where I am now serving my second term. So I'm already in the parliament from the autumn 2014, so it's more than 8 years. Speaking about how I ended up in a Russian sanction list, it would not be the worst which happened with me connected with Russia, because Russia came much far, and they, for example, they organized 3 times. 2 times they tried to kill me, 1 time to kidnap me. And the people who tried to do this were arrested. Some of them were in prison and are in prison. Some of them were exchanged, but Russia took them in exchange for Ukrainian prisoners of war. So as you see, it's not the worst thing that Russia can do to put in their sanction list. In any way, I consider all this as a badge of honor, because when such awful regime, which is today's Russian regime, is so afraid of you, I think it shows that you are doing right things.
And as I've heard, you've even been arrested by Russia at one point. How did that happen?
Yeah, also this I have, and this experience too. It was 2015, and maybe you remember Russian opposition leader Boris Nemtsov was killed near Kremlin. It was in the end of February 2015. Now, I knew Boris personally, and I wanted to go and to say like final goodbye to him, to take part in his funeral. And I went to Moscow. There was that day, it was the day before funeral, there was a big action in his commemoration. People came to the streets, there was a big march. And I took part in this. At this public rally, I was arrested by Russian police. I was beaten. They took me to the police department of Kitai-Gorod in Moscow. At that time, I already was member of Ukrainian Parliament, member of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. I had my diplomatic passport with me, so I also had a diplomatic immunity, but they just didn't care about this at all. So they interrogated me for like many hours. and they put me to some like cell without any even a window. It's kind of for those who are like very, very dangerous criminals. That already the big scandal started in the world because like I disappeared. Then there was a announcement of Russian authorities that I'm arrested, and because of this big scandal, like in the end of the day, Russia decided to let me go out and to send me out from Russian Federation. So I spent night in Ukrainian embassy. There was no ambassador already because that was already after Russia started the war against Ukraine, occupied Crimea and in Donbass. But still, there were some representatives there. So I spent night there, and next morning I took the first flight from Moscow to Kiev. At that time, such flights existed. So that's yeah. So I have a lot of personal stories with Russia.
What is shocking to me about this experience, aside from the fact that Russia so brazenly attacks somebody with diplomatic immunity, is not that it should be arresting, beating, or torturing, or interrogating anybody for participating in a peaceful congregation, but the fact that they did not fear international reaction in response to something that is such a clear violation of international norms in itself speaks volumes. I think
You're right, and I can add. I'm sorry, I just want to add one thing. It was a funny story. I think your viewers and listeners will like it. When they found, so I said that I have diplomatic passport. I showed them. This policeman took it, and then it was funny. At first, I was interrogated by police officers. And then some other people in civilian came. So I think that was FSB. I don't know, but I think so. And quite senior because like policemen were very like scared of these people, and they gave my passport to these people in civilian, and newly came, and they started to just to watch my passport. And several days before this, I was in Brussels, and if you ever been in Brussels, the airport, which mostly is used to come to Brussels, is called Outrage National. It's in French, so it's like national airport of Brussels. And the stamp which they put in the passport when you are crossing the border, they put a stamp in your passport. So the stamp looked like this: Bru, like Brussels, Bruxelles, the first letters, and NAT, N-A-T, the first letters of National. They saw it and they started to scream, "He is from NATO. He is spy. He has a stamp in his passport. NATO." And they started to pass my passport from one to another. Very, very happy. "Yes, we found he has a stamp." I said, "Guys, have you been in school in general? I mean, like, who are you? You are absolutely ridiculous." But that was that. I mean, at that time, I understood the level. So when people saying how like Putin on February 24 of 2022 made such mistake to attack Ukraine, how he couldn't understand that Ukrainians don't want to be part of Russia and so on. I can tell you because for them, Brunat is NATO. That's all, because that is the level of Russian FSB, including Putin himself.
I have to say, what you're telling is, I think, maybe come as a surprise to everybody, because the majority of Americans still perceive Russia as a rational actor. It may a malevolent actor, but a rational actor with some level of degree of understanding of international affairs. But what you're telling me speaks a very low level of international engagement. It sounds more like something from Khrushchev or Brezhnev era than from.
No, it's worse. No, Irina, it's worse. I haven't lived during the times of Khrushchev and Brezhnev. I was born in 1980. That was the end of Brezhnev, but definitely I don't remember this. But I can tell you that it's definitely worse because Russia, Soviet diplomatic school was definitely and Soviet Secret Service, KGB, was definitely better because who was Putin in KGB? He was a very low rank officer. He even wasn't like a chief spy. He was a man who was in charge of Dom Kultury in GDR. I don't know how to translate it in English. It's kind of he was the head of some kind of a concert hall in a small German town. Yeah, definitely he was from KGB because all of them were from KGB there. But he was very low level KGB officer. So it's much worse than it was in the times of USSR. Corruption, there was not such high corruption in USSR how it is now in Russian Federation. And in general, they have what is called a negative отрицательный отбор. So it's like negative selection. So the worse you are, the higher you will be on the scale in these organizations. Why? Because if you are really intelligent, your boss will not like you because you can be a danger. And the more stupid you are, the better your chances are to get higher on this scale. Just watch at these people. Watch at Shoigu. Watch at other people who represent Russia today in the world. They are absolutely crazy. Like, watch at Surovikin, who was the chief military general in attack on Ukraine. Everything is on his face. Absolutely everything.
So not only is the West largely overestimating Russia's military capabilities, but they are also overestimating the level of perceptiveness and intelligence and strategy among the high level echelons. It may be very simple and it may not be all that strategic at all. And so it sounds like it's been the same situation for many years. This didn't just happen yesterday when they started the war. It's been like that for many years. And of course, the West did not watch these events closely. They did not understand what was really happening politically and essentially treated Russia the way you would treat each other, members of NATO or any countries with a fairly high level, where you expect a high level of understanding from the government and from lay people. That certainly explains a lot, but I think this is not something that comes through from news coverage, which tends to not focus on such scandalous details and just deals with the summary of public affairs and decisions, and therefore this nuance, this personal coverage just does not come through. When you returned to Ukraine after that incident, you seem to have gotten involved in a number of different committees and activities. Could you tell us a little bit about them, what they're doing? Because right now, the understanding of Ukraine and its government here is not much higher than understanding of Russia. People know that, President Zelensky, they know there is a parliament. That's about it. They don't really know how it functions, what it focuses on, what the current interests are, and how it relates to other countries.
I think what can be interesting for people in the United States about Ukrainian Parliament is just the fact that Ukrainian Parliament continued to operate in its building in absolutely constitutional way, even when Russian army was 30 kilometers from our building. Like Russia invaded the full-scale invasion started on February 24. In 2 hours after this, we had a meeting of the parliament. We voted for martial law. After this, it was said who wants to leave the city can do this, but majority said that we will not do this. And part of people, including me, we joined territorial defense. And because I'm not a military person at all, but I took weapons in my arms to defend the capital. Because it was clear that Russia, its objective number one, to take Kiev. And then we met several times during the time of siege of Kiev by Russians. And it was interesting. We were coming to the parliament with our Kalashnikovs, leaving them in on the entrance, coming to the hall where we voted, then coming back, taking our Kalashnikovs and back to our duties, like checkpoints, convoys, evacuation missions, and things like this. So I think that shows it shows like that Ukrainian parliament is a really real institution, mature institution. It shows that it was not just President Zelensky, which was very important, that he stayed in the country, he stayed in the city, he was not leaving Kiev. But also that was important for people to know that members of the parliament are also there, not all of them, but many of them. And I think that's important. Speaking about the parliament is the parliament. It's like Congress and Senate of the United States. We are considering the laws, we're adopting laws, we work on political announcements. So we have caucuses like in the American Congress, there is a Ukrainian caucus, there is, I don't know, French caucus, and so on. So there is we have caucuses in our parliament. We have international delegations from the parliament. So I'm a member, as you already said, I'm a member of Ukrainian delegation to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, which sits in Strasbourg. And this organization, Council of Europe, it's not European Union, but it unites 40, like it was at the beginning, it was Council of Europe, which was created after the Second World War. Only after appeared the first steps to European Union. So that was like organization which started the process of Euro integration. And now in the Council of Europe, there are 46 countries after Russia was expelled a year ago after its invasion in Ukraine. So 46 countries, it's all European countries and plus other countries around on the continent, including Ukraine, Turkey, Georgia, Moldova, and other countries which are not member of Switzerland, for example, which is also not a member of European Union, but member of Council of Europe. So that's what is one more part of my job. Also, I'm active in what we call informational frontline. I have almost 1.5 million followers in my social media. It's Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Telegram, and others. So that's what we're doing and what I do. And also, as you already said, I run the biggest in Ukraine network of educational volunteering centers. If you will be interested in this topic, I can tell you more about this.
Yes, absolutely, because I think a lot of people think that, well, when there's a war, then everything just stops, but actually part of this education, part of this part of humanitarian activities, always also part of what happens, and these centers can play an important purpose during the war. One of the issues that's been on a lot of people's minds is the issue of the refugees and internally displaced persons, and I'm curious how such centers can play a role in kind of helping people during, in wartime.
It's two different things. So, I mean, I also work on this level in the Council of Europe. As you told, I'm Vice President of Committee on Migration and Displaced People, Refugees in the Council of Europe, which is important job. And today, unfortunately, Ukrainians is group number one of refugees in. We don't like to call Ukrainians who live now in Europe or in the United States of America refugees, because like majority of them, like absolute majority of them, want to come back home. So we call them externally displaced people, because refugee is somebody who is leaving the country and doesn't want to come back on a number of reasons. But Ukrainians, they mostly want to come back. And as soon as, like, for example, as soon as Russian army retreated from Kiev, tens and tens of thousands of and hundreds of thousands, even citizens of Kiev, they came back to their houses. And the same happens all the time. So, speaking about my centers, they're called Goncharenko centers. So we started it more than 2 years ago as educational cultural centers, aiming first of all on not big towns and cities of Ukraine. So we did not open, Kiev or Kharkiv or Odessa or Lviv, big cities. But the idea was to give access to education to smaller towns, because like there, that it was a big problem. And everything in our centers is free of charge. The basic activity is English language learning for adults and children. So thousands and thousands of Ukrainians came through our centers learning English language, because people want to learn English and want to better understand the free world, and also to open more possibilities for themselves. But not only English language, we have other languages too. We have cybersecurity, financial literacy, we have cultural events and other things. After February 24, so that was very successful project. Everything is absolutely supported on the private basis, so we don't receive any penny from a state budget of Ukraine. And at the same time, we are the biggest non-governmental network of such centers in the country. And in our donators and like patrons, we, for example, have member of House of Lords, Lord Ashcroft, and other. So I mean, we are proud of what we are doing. And also, maybe if anybody who's listening to us now will be interested in this, will be absolutely happy to communicate, to cooperate, and to do something together. And everybody can become our also patron. It's very easy. After February 24, we, like the whole country, definitely new needs arrived, and we became a hub for displaced people. Like many people just lived in our centers for some times. We are distributing food, clothes, hygiene items. We also help our military, what we can do. So we are doing like this part of job. In general, I can tell you that volunteering in Ukraine is absolutely like so important and widespread phenomenon. I can tell you, but the phenomenon I can tell you widespread and very important phenomenon. So that's why we are also part of this. What we are proud of.
The early stages of the war were actually filled with harrowing pictures of people staying in subway stations and various random places because while they were either their buildings had collapsed or they were trying to flee somewhere and got stuck in the way. What has happened to all these people there? Is everyone now either relocated elsewhere or back home, or do you still see the phenomenon of urban areas where people still have to hide or relocate to shelters or to stations or places due to the destruction of the infrastructure?
It's very different, because there are very different situations. People were coming to shelters from their houses, from their apartments, to hide from Russian missile attacks. And some people continue to do this. I can tell you, many people stopped to do this. People got used to this. It's quite dangerous. And we saw when Russia again attacked, for example, Dnipro, which is one of the biggest Ukrainian cities, not long ago, they just hit the residential building, and almost 50 people were killed, including women, children, aged people. So it's better definitely to come to shelters during the air raid signals. And we have often, yesterday, for example, there was a very big missile attack against Ukraine. Again, more than 100 missile drones and everything else was sent to kill, just to destroy our critical infrastructure, energy infrastructure, which is war crime, because it's nothing to do about military, just to make people suffer. Yeah, but many people are tired to come often to shelters, so they're doing it much less. But some people are continuing to do this, but it's not because they don't have where to live, but that is because of security reasons, just to come to shelter. Other people, like whose houses were destroyed, for example, that was also the case, unfortunately, in many Ukrainian cities. So some of them needed to be somewhere, but no, that's not the case that they're living in metro today. Metro works in Kiev, in big cities, and nobody lives there. So those who didn't have where to, those who doesn't have where to live. Part of them relocated to safer areas of Ukraine. Part of them relocated to Europe. Some of them relocated to United States of America. Not many, because it's a long distance, it's quite hard. But also there are thousands of Ukrainians who came to United States. But mostly the biggest number of Ukrainian externally displaced people today live in Poland. It's gotten to different estimations from 1.2 to 1.5 million people. The second is Germany, near 1 million people. The third, I think, is Czech Republic, but I think Czech Republic is the third. So, like in general, millions of Ukrainians today live abroad.
Another issue that I've noticed is that while various Ukrainian cities have been mentioned in the news as targets of attacks or in terms of the military activity going on, it's very difficult to get a sense of any of them from the way everything is being described, because the focus is naturally on the military situation, on the strategic issues, not necessarily on the cities themselves. And Odessa actually has a reputation, you just as being one of the more colorful parts in Ukraine. It's got a very special history, and I don't think anyone in the US is really, other than descendants of people from that area, really know much about it. And I think this is actually a good opportunity to share a little bit about its background, its history. What is it like today, and how has it been handling the war?
You want us to speak about Odessa, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was born in Odessa. My family lives in Odessa now. Yeah, and me personally, I'm based like both in Odessa and Kiev. In Kiev, because I was a member of the parliament. Yeah, so I quite often move from Odessa to Kiev, back and forward. So that is, for me, very important city, and I think one of the most beautiful and important cities in the world, because when Putin, with his attack, closed Odessa ports, and the whole world realized how important is Odessa and Ukraine, because when our export of agricultural goods of Ukrainian crops was stopped, the whole world felt the results of this in the peaking of prices on food. But it's in the prosperous countries, but in countries like Somali or I don't know, other African countries or Asian countries, it just led to a starving. Millions of people were starving without Ukrainian food, because Ukraine is one of the biggest agricultural exporters in the world, and 90% of Ukrainian agriculture export was coming through Odessa, ports of big Odessa, and so Odessa, like historically, is important, and still today, it's a beautiful city. Unfortunately, there were missile attacks on our city too, but they were not so massive like in some other cities. So the city is not heavily destroyed, and the historical center of the city is almost not damaged. Hopefully, it will continue like this, because after already the war started, Odessa was acknowledged as a World Heritage Site by UNESCO, the central part of the city. Odessa was waiting for this for quite a long time, but the decision was already made after the start of invasion. So life looks like today. About Odessa, why Odessa is important for Putin, it's clear, because he wants to control the Black Sea. That's why he needs, Odessa is the biggest city on the Black Sea. There is no any other country, city bigger than Odessa, which is to be a port of the Black Sea. So Odessa is very important for Putin, and he is saying about it quite often. So, like historically, also he all the time tried to make some claims, because historically Odessa was the fourth largest city in the Russian Empire in 19th century, after St. Petersburg, Moscow, and Warsaw. But it's like when he's telling, okay, you were part of Russian Empire, and so what? And Warsaw was. and like he just he tries to rebuild an empire. But we don't want to live in Russia. Absolutely, Odessa is the capital of southern Ukraine, and we love our country. But we realize that Putin is very much interested in Odessa. But I'm sure that he failed in all other his aims. He will fail in this too. Speaking about life in Odessa today, it's very, first of all, Odessa suffers very much from these energy cuts. Odessa probably today is the worst city from the point of view of electricity supply to people, because Putin was like attacking very constantly Odessa. Russia was attacking our energy infrastructure, and it's very damaged now. So people have now, like, the situation is really difficult. Like, people, it depends from one part of city to another, but in general, people have electricity like 2, 3, 4 hours per day, not more. So definitely it's very difficult to live like this, because like, just imagine you live in big residential house, and if you don't have electricity, elevators don't work, electrical ovens don't work, running water could not be pumped on the upper floors. So if you live on the side, 16th floor, you just can't live like this. And that's what Russia is trying to do, just to make people suffer, unfortunately. So that's how life looks like. But from other point of view, sometimes you can see Odessa streets, and there are people on them, sun is shining, beautiful city, and it looks like almost normal. But next moment it can be a missile attack. There is curfew. So at 11 p.m., the whole city is absolutely stopped, because it's a start of curfew time till 5 a.m. So it's like this.
That must be incredibly difficult to experience, because there's nothing worse than when somebody comes in and tries to harm your own home. Now we are seeing that there's a lot of activity there, despite the fact that on the one hand you're handling the war, on the other, the Ukrainian people are still very active. They're interacting with a lot of the outside world, and to my surprise, I'm hearing from people all over. There are still people who are working. There's still people who are being productive, cooperating with US and European companies as workers. How are they able to maintain this sense of normalcy, despite the fact that, when you think of a war, you think that everything stops, people just do fighting and trying to survive, and there is, that employment and any sort of normal activity just comes to an end. How are people managing to continue being productive, continuing contributing and working on anything other than war-related issues?
Because the country is big. Ukraine is one of the biggest countries of Europe, and the fighting is continuing today in the eastern part of Ukraine. A little bit in the southern part too, but mostly now in the eastern part of Ukraine. And like distance from, for example, Lviv, which is the capital of western part of Ukraine, closer to Polish border city, one of the biggest cities in the country. Distance from Lviv to front line is hundreds and hundreds of kilometers. I don't know, like maybe 600, 700, hundreds. So it's quite long. It's a big distance. So the closer you're to front line, the more difficult the situation. And when you're absolutely close, like towns and cities in Donbass or Kherson, which is on the front line, or other cities, or Kharkiv, definitely the life there is much worse and more difficult, more attacks, more problems, and so on. But if you're living quite far from this, sometimes you can almost not feel anything, because the country is a big country. So the same about economics. A lot of businesses relocated and factories relocated to the western part of the country, to the central part of the country, far away from the front line. they continue to work. The problem is with energy, because definitely you can't product. It's very difficult for economy, the situation with energy, what we have. So it was so frustrating when we were asking for air defense for months, and we were asking for patriots, and this decision was, and it was clear that Putin will weaponize winter. It was clear from the beginning that he will attack power grid, but still we were not provided with patriots at time. Just now, just like a month ago, this decision was made, and now we will wait several months more before our crew will be trained and patriots will arrive. If Ukraine would receive patriots last summer, the situation in the country would be much better. We will need much less support, including financial, like hundreds of people probably will be saved, and the economy would be in much better situation. People would not suffer so heavily, and so on. But what we have, and so part of economy continues. Part of economy, like today, Ukraine is the biggest IT hub of Europe. So many IT specialists, they just work from their apartments and houses. They continue to work. Some part of cafes, restaurants, they continue to work. So there is a service. There are banks. There are schools. There are hospitals. They continue to work. But definitely, economy is in very bad situation. So we try to do everything we can to continue the most possible normal life, how it could be, because that is our life, and millions of Ukrainians live in, and the children, new children are born. There are new weddings. There are yeah, but there is a lot of suffering at the same time. So it's like this.
You mentioned school and education. In terms of areas where education has been disrupted by the fighting, what kind of support do you think is possible or necessary at this time from the outset? What can be done to help children continue with education even in these conditions?
First of all, you can help Goncharenko centers that will be helped, because we are in many towns where people, children and adults need this. But also Ukrainian schools, public schools, they continue to work. If they are closer to frontline, they mostly work online, but they continue to work. And we are trying our best. Definitely, it's not, definitely like 2 years of COVID. Now, 1 year already, 1 year of full-scale invasion. Definitely, our teenagers are deprived from a real access to education, and that is very frustrating and painful. But what can we do? Like hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian kids now in Europe coming to European schools. But yes, hundreds of thousands are still in Ukraine, and the way they are receiving education is very difficult.
Well, I certainly hope that one of the issues that can be handled in the future is facilitating education and investing into that, and not focus solely on the politics, because this humanitarian situation is just as necessary and it's just as important to for healthy society to continue functioning. One other issue that I was interested in is one of the things you do is be part of a caucus focused on free caucuses. Can you tell us about Ukraine's relationship with the caucuses and what is happening now in light of the political situation?
I believe that Russian Empire should disappear. Russian Empire is evil, and it was evil, it is evil, and it will continue to be evil. That is the last colonial empire in Europe, the last one. And like Ottoman Empire disappeared, Austro-Hungarian Empire disappeared, German Empire disappeared. And after this, these people live much better. I mean, like, who benefited more from denazification and deimperialization of Germany than the Germans themselves? They are not a cannon fodder for new crazy tyrann. They are not criminals who are like it was in 1930s and 40s, who organized Holocaust or things like this. Now they are normal, prosperous, free nation. The same can happen with Russian people, but only after Russian Empire will disappear. After Russia will come through de-imperialization, denazification. Uh, that's why I believe that we need to do everything we can to help and to support the nations who are suppressed by Russian Empire today. Many of these nations are indigenous people of Caucasus, of other parts of Russian Federation today. And these people want to be free. And for example, Chechen people, it's a small nation in North Caucasus. They fought for like many years against Russians, trying to win their freedom. And they even won the first Chechen war against Russian Federation, but then they lost the second one. And Russia organized like a genocide of Chechen people. One of 5 Chechen people were killed. It's 200,000 people were killed. Just imagine this number. That's awful genocide which had happened on our eyes. So these people now are suppressed, and unborn in 2000 Chechen boys now are fighting in Ukraine against Ukraine, being part of Russian army. That's how Russian empire works. All empires work the same way. So they are using people as a fuel. So they suppress Chechnya, now they're using Chechens to attack other countries. Then they occupied part of Georgia, now they're taking people from these parts of Georgia to attack other countries. Then they occupied Ukrainian Crimea and part of Donbass. And now they're taking Ukrainian men from Crimea and Donbass to attack Ukrainians who live on free territories. And that's why Putin was so interested and is so interested in Ukraine, because Ukraine, it's millions of men whom he wants to take and to send them to kill and to take new territories, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Moldova, Romania, and other countries. So coming back to Caucasus, these people deserve their freedom, so we should support them. I believe in this. That's why we created and I chair this caucus for free Caucasus in Ukrainian Parliament. I sponsored the bill about recognition of independence of Chechnya, Ichkeria, and already Ukrainian Parliament voted for resolution which says that Chechnya today is occupied by Russia, acknowledging the genocide which Russia organized against Chechen people. Also, there are Cherkessian people there, for example, the Dagestani people. The same happened with them. So that's what we are trying to do, to raise this issue, to raise a hand in support of these nations and to help them to become free. They deserve it like any other nation on the planet. They deserve it. So that's why we created this caucus.
It has created somewhat of an awkward situation on the international stage because there's somewhat of a double standard regarding the issues of independence for ethnic minorities, for nations who have been occupied by large empires. Because actually there's similar situation in Iran, which is closely cooperating on Russia, in part for that reason, actually.
Yeah.
So, and the one thing that there's been a lot about Chechens being sent to Ukraine to try to assassinate the president and to take part in military activity. What has been far less covered, or at least didn't get as much attention even after the news coverage, were the Chechens who had fled Russia previously and who came to Ukraine, to Germany, to various European countries, and had been targeted for assassination even before this current invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah, that's true. And now many of them, it's also, I should say this, there are Chechen people who are fighting inside Russian army. They're made to fight. Many of them, they don't want to fight, but they are sent as a conscripts. But many Chechen people who fled before Russia, they came to Ukraine to fight for Ukraine in our international legion. So we have the Americans, by the way, we have the Chechen people, Georgians, Belarusian people, and other nations fighting for Ukraine together with us. And even we have a unit of Russian citizens who left Russia, and they understand that the biggest threat to Russia itself is a regime, this awful regime which they have, and they fight together with Ukrainians shoulder to shoulder.
The one thing that many people that has been a very important theme throughout this past year is the low morale on the part of the Russians and the constant internal bickering, the fact that people didn't know what they were getting into and they were sent there anyway, and generally the unhappiness among the Russian forces, the high rate of desertion, and so on and so forth. The most recent issue about that was that some of the Russians were taken off front lines in Donbass after being attacked by some of their supposed allies there. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because there is actually a very poor understanding of Russia's interest in some of the areas there and why they were backing separatism and to what extent that separatism is real versus something that is actually not representative of the general situation, and why are some of the even people who supported Russia are turning on them now? What exactly is the story there?
But there was no separatism in Ukraine. There was inspired Russian, there was a part of Russian hybrid war against Ukraine. And now everybody can see it. When Russia was unsuccessful with this hybrid war, they started full-scale invasion. They just want to take Ukraine, as I told you, to take the territories, to take people, and then to attack next territories. That is awful empire because they don't care about development of their own country. Russian Federation controls 1/7 of the world landmass, and they don't do anything to develop these territories. They just rob it. They just taking resources from it and attacking new territories. That's the worst thing about this empire. So, and they continue to do this. But why morale of Russian people, Russian soldiers in Ukraine is low? It's clear why, because what they're doing in Ukraine. Russian propaganda tries to say them that they are defending Russia, but why they're defending Russia in Ukraine? Why they should defend their country being in another country? Nobody can understand this, and definitely many of them don't understand this. So that's why their moral is low. They don't understand what they do. Also, they have a lot of casualties, and they clearly see that Russian military command, they don't care about people at all. They just like people for them is just nothing. It's a cannon fodder, and definitely it makes their morale very low. That's what we see. If possible, one more question and let us finish because I took 1 hour for our meeting. Thank you.
Sure. My last question is: what do you see happening after the war is over in terms of your own activity? What do you think is going to be the top priority for Ukraine, and how do you see communicating it effectively to the US, to Europe, beyond this propaganda war that Russia has been waging in some ways far more successfully than its actual military war? How do you prioritize the fact that Ukraine's independence is not just about physical control of its territory, but also about its integration with the West, its successful relationship with the West, and it's not just about procuring weapons. It's not just about this. How do you share the vision that can hopefully people get, even those who have been affected by Russian media campaigns and all this divisive rhetoric out of there and into a more constructive mindset?
About Russia propaganda, I can tell you one word. It's quite persuasive, and they invest billions of dollars in their propaganda. That's part of Russian war, and it can be quite successful because they're using Goebbels style, who were saying that just repeat lie 100 times and people will believe in it, and that's what they're doing. I was struck when I was in the United States not long ago. I had an honor to give a lecture in University of Pennsylvania, And after I spoke with the professors and students and so on, and one of professors of University of Pennsylvania, which is one of the best universities in the world, asked me, okay, but what about Nazis in Ukraine? And like I was like, it was really very intelligent person, and he asked this, and I like, how persuasive is Russian propaganda if such people start to think maybe there is a problem? I has answered him, you know that Ukraine is a democratic country, and Ukrainians democratically elected Jewish men to be a president. How it can be in Nazi country or where there are a lot of Nazis just out, and he was just laughing himself, saying, yeah, it's ridiculous. But that's something which Russia is continuing to repeat. And some people think, oh, maybe there is something about this. So that's how their propaganda works. But answering your main question, which is about the future of Ukraine, I think it's absolutely clear. Today, Ukraine is a beacon of democracy. Today, Ukraine and the future of our country, I am absolutely sure in this, is to be a frontline unit of the free world. And to be, because we are fighting not only for our independence, not only against genocide which Russia organized against Ukrainians, but for our values, which are our common values: democracy, rule of law, human rights, human dignity. This is our values. And after we will win this war, that will be, by the way, which is very important for the whole planet, because like China is watching, other countries are watching what to do, what they will do. They want to see how successful or unsuccessful will be Putin. So he should be unsuccessful to prevent more wars on the planet. And after this, Ukraine will be a strongest ally of the United States of America. Will be a really very strong country with a strong army, with a strong spirit, and we will defend these values everywhere. We will support nations who are suppressed everywhere. We will help all the countries which are attacked by tyrannies everywhere. Like we will help Israel fighting against Iranian awful regime. We will help Taiwan in their will to develop freely. We will. That is our historical mission now, and we will never be again the country which like nobody knows. I mean, not nobody, but many didn't know where it is. Ukraine will be a leader. We will do everything for this. We have a lot of challenges. We need to rebuild the country because the country is devastated. We need to take back our people, millions of externally displaced people back home. We have a lot to do, but I am absolutely sure that we will do this. We will succeed, and Ukraine has absolutely bright future. Thank you for this.
Thank you so much to everyone who was listening. I think the message is very clear. I think makes absolutely no sense for anybody with an iota of common sense to take any sides with an empire of organized criminals and poorly educated thugs who have nothing but destruction to contribute. And Ukraine is not just about survival. It's not about the propaganda that you hear from Russians about how much money was spent. It has a vision. It has a vision to not only survive, but to integrate with the rest of the world in the goals of promoting the values that we hold dear, practical, with practical steps, with practical plan, with a practical activity beyond just talk. And we're already seeing some of that happening today, and I think we should be talking a lot more about that and not just the military activity going on, because a country is always so much more than what happens to it from the outside. It's also about the initiatives that it is taking in terms of its own defining its own future and its cooperation with others. Thank you so much for joining us today. This was MP Goncharenko from Ukraine. For those joining us, this was the Washington Outsider Report on the Coalition Radio. Rinat Zuckerman, the editor-in-chief of the Washington Outsider. Please join us again next week, Tuesday, 9 p.m. Thank you and have a good night.